Alright, so second video of Ark. Um, just to reiterate what we're doing here, just making some Ark videos on, suggestion on how to play Ark. Um, and again, to reiterate, part of the reason doing that is I haven't really seen any videos online that really give a good demonstration on how to play Ark. So one of the goals of this series, so to speak, is just to show um, some suggestive gameplay on playing Ark um, that I haven't seen. I really haven't seen anyone playing like how I've been playing it or started to play it. So I'm just illustrating that. Um, and then also, one other thing I'd like to do, which will kind of be difficult to capture in video form, because when you're playing a video game and then making a video um, to kind of show online, it's kind of difficult to capture just some elements which we'll go into later. I'll kind of go into later. To a certain extent, as I do this voiceover, so to speak, over this video, it'll just be me kind of saying what I'm doing and explaining what I'm doing, which, kind of get repetitive to a certain extent. Um, and I'll have to just kind of follow the video to get to points to where I just say things that bring out what I want to say, so to speak. Now, one of the things I've done, which, like I've said before in previous videos, is I've started building a base. And one of the things that you want to do is you want to, as soon as you spawn, one of the first things you want to do, if not the first thing you want to do, after collecting resources to make some small tools and basically trying to clear out the area where you spawn of any hostiles, is you want to immediately make a base. And the base just, offers a place for you to organize your resources. Not very complicated there. And it also offers a place for you to basically store your tames. And it also offers protection, so to speak. And so you basically want to build a base as soon as you spawn. So when you're playing Ark, where you spawn is important, because that's where you're going to start, building a base. And in the island map, the only place where ankylosauruses spawn in easy zones is on what's been called Herbivore Island. So to me, when you're playing the island, which, the island's an important map, because it's the first map you might play, more than likely are going to play. And as you play this game, you've got the ability to go to other islands from this map. So it's, I don't want to kind of give too much away how to do it, but you don't want to necessarily start and restart playing the game. Once you start, you just want to keep playing it and not stop. Although it's kind of neat to restart over to kind of learn how to kind of play it, but once you kind of understand how to play it, you just want to play it all the way through continuously, never looking back, so to speak. Now, I'm taking out a Overraptor here, which that's a level 1, which is good as far as Overraptors go. You don't want to get a high level one. But I don't have any eggs to kind of tame him with, so I can't really do anything with him now. And one of the things that I've kind of messed around with is when you spawn in an area, Do you want to take out all the dinosaurs that are around you? Do you want to tame them? And then the ones that you don't tame, you want to harvest them so you can get hide and meat and whatnot? Or do you want to leave some of them? And on that one, I'm not really sure, and it has to do with how things possibly respawn back into the island. Like, for instance, um, when you harvest an area, cut down all the trees, harvest the rocks and whatnot, what determines how it respawns? And sometimes in some areas it seems like things respawn back really fast, and in some areas after you kind of go through and cut down everything, it kind of sometimes can take some time for those things to respawn back into the island so that you can harvest them again. And it may be just if you stay in an area and you keep rendering in the area with the program keeps rendering in the area again, then it may influence the spawn rate. Like, for instance, if you're in servers, you've got some dinos and they've got food on them where they need to eat. Anytime anybody goes over where your base is or where your dinos are, it's going to trigger that area to become active, and that'll trigger your dinos or whatnot to consume more food. Which, when you're playing single player, that may have an effect. And also, if there's other dinosaurs around that are wild, so to speak, when you're playing single player, that may have an effect on the respawn rate of like trees and rocks and whatnot. So I've played it to where you just eliminate everything. Like, for instance, you might go to Herbivore Island and you just eliminate everything off the island. And when I've done that, it seems like obviously when I do that, I leave. I have no reason for being in the area, so I'm not, on the island, and then I'll kind of visit back to see how things are respawning. And typically, things won't respawn very rapidly at all. And then I've also went into Herbivore Island and I've left a significant amount of dinos, which what I'm thinking is maybe you might harvest the males and you might leave the female dinosaurs, the ones that you're not interested in taming, so to speak. And currently that's what I'm doing now in the game series that I'm playing now. And the respawn rate of the rocks and whatnot has been very rapid. Now that just may be because I've cleared it only one time, or I've spent a considerable amount of time over on Herbivore Island after I've mined the area. But I don't know. I'm sure in some circumstances I'll harvest everything, in some circumstances I won't, so to speak. But I build the base. That's kind of the first thing that you want to do. I've played in the past with my children, for instance, where they've left things that they've harvested basically on their dinosaurs. They haven't like taken things off. I mean, that's a common way that people tend to play, to where they just leave their stuff on their dinosaurs. And I don't recommend doing that, because you kind of want to take an inventory of what you got and use storage containers and whatnot to put things in. And you don't typically need a lot of storage containers. I've seen where people line them up, you know, to the narrow end of like a large storage box, and just have basically like file cabinets where they can put stuff. And I don't really recommend doing that. You kind of want to use the items how they're intended, face them how they're intended, to kind of get more a real world feel, what you might do in a home, so to speak. But I found typically you don't need a lot of storage containers to store the resources that you collect. In these videos, I won't really be able to tell you so much what I'm thinking. I mean, right now I'm just making a base and I'm going over to kind of scout to see what I might tame. Now, kind of how I'm playing is kind of like a mistake. One of the things that you want to do is you want to build a base, and then you basically want to be able to get dinosaurs to make kibble. Basically, the kibble's got kind of tiers to it, or levels, which I'm sure anyone that plays Ark probably knows this, but nonetheless, for those that don't. And each tier, there's like 5 or 6 tiers that where you make different kibble, and there might be 5 or 6 different dinosaurs that the eggs from which make the first tier of the kibble. And basically what you want to do is you want to basically be able to produce eggs to make the kibbles on the different tiers. Like, for instance, on the first tier, the dodo basically lays eggs, probably lays more eggs than any dinosaur in the game, or any tame or creature or whatever in the game. So you want to, at first, before you tame anything, which I don't do in this, I didn't do it this way, but I should have, is the first thing you want to do is go out and get yourself one male dodo, because that influences the basically egg production. You just need one male, and then you want to get about probably between 10 and 20 female dodos, so you can basically make that first tier of kibble. Now, kibble, basically, if you read online or whatnot, is basically said primarily is for taming, which, in this game I've got the default settings, which causes the dinosaurs to spawn with lower levels, which is kind of what I want, because the reason why I've got it the default and why it's spawning the dinosaurs as low levels is my primary concern. It's not to make the game easier, because when you've adopted a good type of gameplay, it doesn't matter how hard the game is. You're still going to be successful, and you really shouldn't die so much, or despawn to just because the island's harder if you've got a proper form of gameplay. But it's going to take longer for the creatures that you're trying to tame, and I have no desire to sit here and wait for like an hour or two for some kind of high level creature to become tame. That's just doesn't make any sense to me. I just don't want to do that. However, I appreciate the fact that taming dinosaurs in this game is really a value, and there's nothing wrong with the cost and time, but I don't want to wait hours and hours for a creature to tame, so to speak. So I got it on the default settings, which is a low hardness or low difficulty, and I've got it primarily there just to reduce the tame time. Now, as I was talking about, I'm interested in making kibble, which if you feed the dinosaurs or the things that you're trying to tame a kibble, either to the level that they prefer or higher, obviously they tame faster, and they also, I believe, get a taming bonus, which kind of helps their stats, and they can also gain levels from it. Primarily, that's great, and I like that, but also the reason why I'm making kibble is to long term, I'd like to feed the tames basically the kibble. Now, if you read online about the kibble, it's typically recommended that you use it to tame the creatures, and you don't really use it to feed the creatures. Now, that I kind of disagree with, which I don't know if I'll disagree with that forever. And the reason for that is The kibble it operates different on different gaming platforms. Like for instance, if you play on the Switch, typically you tame a dinosaur. That dinosaur produces eggs, and that kibble that you make from those eggs is specific. Like for instance, here's a parasaur, and if you got the eggs from a parasaur and made kibble from it, which the dinosaurs typically in a group, the kibble is all made the same. But if you're using a parasaurus egg, it remains like parasaurus egg kibble. And when you feed that to a specific creature, like for instance, the parasaurus kibble may be effective in taming brontosauruses, for instance, which I don't believe is the case at all. But nonetheless, that kibble that you make from parasaurus will only work to speed up the taming on, for instance, like a brontosaurus. And which the kibble has a certain food value, and on the Switch, I know for certain that the food value of the specific kibble that the dinosaur that you're feeding it to hopefully prefers it, but the dinosaur that prefers the kibble that you make, that specific kibble has an enormous food value. For instance, I don't remember what specific kibble a pterodon prefers on the Switch, but I know that the food value for it is like 120, food value, which is an enormous food value. Whereas if the pterodon eats like a piece of fish or something like that, the food value might only be 15, whereas the kibble's like 10 times or 12 times more effective in feeding the tame that prefers it. And so what that means is the kibble has an enormous food value compared to other things, at least on the Switch. I'm not so sure about, like, for instance, on the Xbox, which is what I'm playing on now. I would assume that food value is enormous as well, but I'm not certain about that. And on the Switch, when you feed a dinosaur that kibble, and again, online it's recommended don't use the kibble to like feed your dinosaurs. But the thing of it is in Ark, you have to feed your dinosaurs, you have to feed your tames. And going out and getting like berries, for instance, to feed herbivores is not very hard. It's very easy to go get a lot of berries. Likewise, if you have carnivores and they eat meat, it's very easy to go out and get some meat to feed your carnivores. That's not very hard. But the thing of it is in the game, there's spoilage. Whereas berries only last so long and then they spoil. Meat only lasts so long and it spoils. Now, if, a berry, for instance, hypothetically lasts only 60 seconds or 2 minutes and then it spoils, it basically, if you have a stack of 100 berries, for instance, they don't all spoil in 2 minutes. Basically, the berry that's on the top of the stack, so to speak, spoils in 2 or 3 minutes. Then the berry underneath it spoils, so you get 99 berries and 98, and then every 2 or 3 minutes you're getting a berry to spoil. So it doesn't all spoil lightning fast, but it all spoils. And in the game, it's not so much going out and collecting food to feed your dinosaurs and having enough food. That's not really the struggle. The struggle is more against spoilage. And you can make preservation bins, and you can make food troughs, and there's even tech troughs that are like refrigerated that will feed your animals, and it'll fight against spoilage, which is good. And there's also refrigerators that you can use to keep your food from spoiling, but all of that stuff requires energy to run it. And The thing of it is the kibble, for instance, has a spoil time of like 3 days. And if you have like a stack of 100 or whatever it is, and each one of those kibbles spoil in 3 days, that's an enormous amount of time. And again, the struggle is against spoilage. It's not so much against having food for your dinosaurs to eat or the availability of it. Your plight is more against spoilage. So again, I'm not so sure about the food values on the Xbox. Whereas I know on the Switch, if you're feeding the preferred kibble, the food value is enormous. Um, for the different specific kibbles, as long as you're feeding it the preferred kibble. And I would hope it's like that on the Xbox, but I'm not 100% sure. I'm not necessarily interested in researching that. I'll find out as I play. Um, but then also, which that's great, and it's kind of a good thing to feed, your tames kibble in that regard. Again, online it's recommended don't do that. Don't go around making kibble to feed your tames. But then also that secondary or primary reason to feed them kibble is so that you basically don't have that fight against spoilage. So, with that being said, it's important to make kibble for taming, and to me specifically, it's important to make kibble to possibly look at it as basically the primary way to feed my tames. And with that being said, when I first spawn, I basically want to make a base immediately right where I spawn, which, since I'm going to make a base right where I spawn, I want to choose a good spawn location of where I spawn. I don't want to necessarily spawn in a difficult area, and I don't want to necessarily spawn in an area where I don't have access to Ankylosaurus. So to me, on the island, the only real place to spawn is somewhere by Herbivore Island, so that you can get quick early game access to Ankylosauruses, which, like I said, I believe in the south, the only place that Ankylosauruses spawn is on Herbivore Island. Other than that, they spawn in harder areas of the map. So, to me, the first place, the spawn location is by Herbivore Island, and as soon as I spawn, I want to start building a base. And as soon as I spawn, I want to start working on kibble. And the first order of business to work on kibble is I want to get a lot of tames, dodos specifically, that can produce eggs. So the Mochops is a passive tame here. I'm not really sure if they they basically take what they request, and their taming effectiveness isn't necessarily based on a kibble. The Parasaurus, however, can be fed, the first tier of the kibble, which can be produced by, like, for instance, dodos and parasaurs and a few other things. I probably shouldn't have tamed that Parasaurus. I should have more focused on taming female dodos and one male dodo to produce kibble, to basically then use the kibble to tame the Parasaurus, which, not perfect, but and then again, that's that. So I made a base, and just a little bit about the base is, to me, I want to make a base, because I do plan on making other bases, is I want to make a base that's as simple as possible, but I don't want to make a base that's so small to where I immediately outgrow it. So I basically make a base that's typically 4 foundations long and 3 foundations wide, which allows me to put a couple of beds, some storage containers in it, preservation bin, table, pestle and mortar, and if I want to put a smithy in there, I can, or a refining forge, I can. And I typically make a base that's only 1 one basically foundation tall, but has a sloped roof so that I can fit in a large storage box or a bookshelf inside of it, which require, like 2 or 1.5 foundations in height in order for it to fit properly. So, like I said, I make it just one foundation high, the structure with a slope in it, so that I can fit those 2 structures in there. I like to put those inside and not outside, and just for aesthetics. I think it's important that when you build a base that you have some form of aesthetics, although it just needs to be minor, and then you have some form of functionality as well. So although you can put large storage boxes outside on the ground right in the middle of the beach, I tend to like to put them inside just for aesthetic reasons. Now, as far as the base design goes and where you put things, and that's pretty important to me in my gameplay. And the reason for that is how you store things affects the gameplay. And to a certain extent, in Ark, the majority of the game has to do with collecting resources, and it has to do with how you navigate, around your base to basically utilize those resources. Like, for instance, if you have a refining forge, you can use thatch or wood to fire that refining forge. You can also use spark powder, which is a little bit more efficient, and you don't necessarily want where your pestle and mortar, where you make the spark powder, to be on the other side of the base of where your refining forge is. You want it to be next to it, which that seems, well, simple enough. That's common sense. But then also you want to have basically places to store pretty much the items that you're going to basically utilize in Ark, and you want them to be in a organized in a way that's kind of functional, that makes sense to your mind, so that you can work with those resources basically efficiently and navigate the map and your base efficiently in a way that's functional. And you don't have to spend a lot of time with that, but you need to be kind of aware of that. Now, I've tamed a Mochops, tamed a Parasaurus. A lot of times you'll see online top 10 dinosaurs to tame, or creatures to tame in Ark, or top 10 dinosaurs not to tame in Ark, so to speak. Which to me, don't get me wrong, I like watching videos like that, and they're enjoyable. They're short, they're to the point, they're just someone talking that plays Ark, which is a game I like to play, and those videos are enjoyable to watch, but they're not really necessarily accurate. That's kind of not a good way to look at the game itself, and saying that one animal, so to speak, is better than another. I mean, all of the basically creatures, to a certain extent, on Ark, they're all good. There's not one of them that's bad, and basically you want to basically tame what's around you. Like, for instance, I built a base here in the Southern Isles by Herbivore Island, and there's going to be certain creatures around there, and I want to basically tame what's around me, what's available. And I don't necessarily want to tame, in my opinion, based on level, so to speak. I don't want to go around the map. Like for instance, if I'm taming dodos, which I'm not really taming them to fight, I'm more taming them to lay eggs. I don't want to go around the map looking for like a level 150 dodo, and if it's not a level 150 dodo, I'm not going to tame it. That kind of doesn't really make any sense. But basically, I want to tame creatures based on ability. The most valuable thing about a creature is its ability. Like, for instance, a dodo can lay eggs, and it's better at laying eggs than any other creature in Ark. And because of that, I'm taming dodos to lay eggs. That's the reason why I'm taming them. A Mochops that I tamed, Mochops has the ability to harvest fiber, which early on in the game there isn't a lot of creatures that can harvest fiber. So I'm basically taming a Mochop so that I can go out and collect fiber. I can go out and collect berries. That's what I'm taming it for. The Mochops also has the ability to collect other items like organic polymer or prime meat and stuff at a higher rate than other creatures can basically collect it. I'm not really taming the Mochops for that reason, even though that's an ability, and that's what I'm concerned about with the tames that I tame is what can they do? What do they bring to the table? I don't really care what level they are. I don't really care what health they are. That's not primary concern. It's what it can do. So I don't really care if it's a super high level or not. Now, when you play like on a server where you might be playing against other players, that may come into play. But the thing of it is if you want a high level, like for instance dinosaur, my opinion, and again, I'm not an expert at playing Ark. I haven't been playing Ark for the last 20 years, and Ark hasn't been around for 20 years, only 5 or so. But even then, I haven't been dedicating my life to playing Ark. I've got other things that I do. So I haven't been playing the game more than anyone else. But the thing of it is in Ark, you have the ability to breed creatures. Now, and again, I may not be 100% accurate, but if I want to, let's say I want to level 300 dodo, which there's really no point in that, but let's say I want to level 300 dodo. To me, the best way of doing that is to not go around the map, not taming dodos that I encounter because they're too low levels. But the best way to get, like for instance, a level 300 level dodo is to get like a level 1 or 2 dodo and level it up. And I believe you can only level up like 88 levels in the game. And again, I may be inaccurate in what I'm saying, but to a certain extent, if you have a level like 30 dodo and another level 30 dodo, male and female obviously, and you breed them together, you're going to get offspring that are level 30. And then, whereas if you breed a dodo in the beginning that's only level 1 or 2, you're only going to be able to level it up to like level 88 or level 89. But if you get those dodos, a male and a female, up to level 30, and then you breed them together, well, then you can level that level 30 dodo up another 88 levels, which brings you up to about 100 and, like level 112 or something like that. And then when you get a couple of dodos that are level 112, you can breed them again, and again, I'm pretty sure your offspring is going to be like level 112, and then you can breed those up another level 88 levels to like level 200. Now to me, it kind of makes sense that in the game when it was designed that now obviously you can probably only breed something up to level 88 levels. There's probably some reason for that. There's some probably programming reason or software reason or architectural reason, or possibly just the game designers decided, well, we're just gonna have them go up 88 levels, but there's probably some kind of architectural reason why you can do that that makes sense in the software or in the programming of the game to where that's what it is. But to me, you utilize breeding to raise those levels up. Now, the thing of it is, if you're playing on a server against other players, you may not want to wait for that tame or go through the process of leveling up a creature with that amount of time. But the thing of it is you kind of want to play Ark to where you're kind of in it, and you don't really want to start over. It's a huge game. There's other islands. It's gigantic. Um, and if you're going to play a game, which I think it's a great game to play because it's just a heck of a value, and I like kind of sandbox games to where that's just my preference. Um, but you don't want to basically be starting over again and again, and you don't necessarily want to start over every time you play a new map, so to speak, but you basically want to transfer your character and offspring of your tames to other islands, and you even want to transfer items to other islands. And if you do that, you're kind of in it for the long haul, and before you know it, you're going to level those dinosaurs up pretty significantly. If you're just playing single player, there's no real reason to have some super duper high level creature other than, like, for instance, to fight the bosses. I imagine the bosses are, have as much health as whatever they have, and you basically just want to get creatures to a reasonable percentage of health and respect to the bosses that you're going to fight. Other than that, if you're taming, your difficulty level, if you're spawning dinosaurs that are level 1 or 2, well, your dodos are going to be spawning at level 1 or 2 based on the difficulty setting, and T-Rexes are going to be spawning at, like, for instance, a comparative level of 1 or 2. I mean, everything's going to be spawning at the same levels, so to speak. So if you're going toe to toe with a dodo against a T-Rex, you're like, well, I've got to have a super duper high level dodo to fight a T-Rex. You're gonna basically be able to do that with something that's low level, so to speak. It's the level. You don't need a high level spawn in order to do that if that's what you want to do. So the levels don't really matter. Like I said, I've got my difficulty set low, basically for taming, so that I can tame things quickly. I don't want to spend 2.5 days trying to tame something. I don't want to stand around watching something be knocked unconscious. Although I agree that investing some kind of cost and time is worth it, because in the game it kind of would defeat the purpose if you could just walk around and touch a dinosaur and it becomes a tame. That kind of is a little silly. But nonetheless, I don't want to spend a bunch of time taming dinosaurs. I want them to be able to tame quickly, and having the difficulty set low, kind of achieves that. Now, as far as, for instance, so from my perspective, I'm interested in taming every creature or every dinosaur that I can possibly tame, that has some kind of ability that I can use. And from my perspective, I think all the creatures have some kind of ability that I can use, and if I haven't found a use for the ability that they have, I might find a use for the ability that they have in the future. But if I don't have one tamed, I'm never going to be able to figure out what would be a good use for that ability. And if I've got a bunch of tames and I'm not really using those tames to do anything, I can at least use their eggs, if they produce eggs, for kibble. So to me, every dinosaur, every creature on the map has value, and if you're in the game for the long haul, there's no reason why you don't necessarily tame everything. So to me, some of the creatures that are around uh, when I encounter them, I'm going to tame them. If I've got the kibble to tame them, that's what I'm gonna tame them. And then it's up to me to figure out how I use that creature. Like for instance, I tamed a Mochops. Um, Mochops, other than that they run from creatures, are pretty good. They're pretty good tames. I don't necessarily get on a Mochops and run around the map and attack things because you can only ride around on one. Other than that, if you're not on them and they get into combat, they're going to run away. But there's different things that a Mochops can basically harvest, where you can level up their ability to harvest something like organic polymer, excuse me, or like prime meat or something like that. So to me, in playing the game, I don't know how many different things they can harvest, but I'm at minimum interested in having a female which can lay eggs of each one of those things. So that if there's like 6 different things that a Mochops can specifically harvest, and you put levels into their ability to harvest those individual things as they level up, I want to have at least 6 female Mochops, and I want to have at least 1 male, um, to basically increase the egg production. So on one hand, me personally, I don't typically use Mochops to harvest specific things. Um, I typically use other tames to harvest the things. In the beginning, I'll use a Mochops to get fiber, um, and that's primarily why I use them. But as far as how many tames of a Mochops do I want at least 1 Mochops for each of those special things that they harvest, and then I want a male, which can figure into that number as well. Like I said, I don't know how many things they harvest specifically. I think it's like 6 or 7, but I want at least 6 or 7 Mochopses so I can specifically level up those different things that they can harvest, and increase level. Even though I don't use them for that, I may use them for that in the future. I want to have the opportunity to use them in that capacity if the need so arises. Like for instance, I think one thing they can harvest is sap, and I think on one of the maps, you can use them to harvest sap from those trees, so to speak. So I want to have a Mochops that's leveled up in each one of those areas. So that tells me I want like 6 or 7 Mochopses, all of them which are female, one of them which is male, and I want to use the Mochops for basically producing kibble, which ironically Mochops is semi-easy to tame if you got the right thing that they want. Um, Especially on this low level, I feed them 1 berry and boom, they're tamed. And then they produce large eggs, which is like equivalent to, like, I believe like a T-Rex egg. Um, and so they produce the tier of the kibble that is large eggs. So having 6 or 7 Mochops is great as long as they're all of them female except for 1, to where I can produce eggs to produce kibble. So I'll have the option of leveling up each different one, and then in the maybe I'll use the Mochops to collect one of those specific items in the future. Maybe I won't, but nonetheless, I'll at least have the value of producing kibble from them. Now, as far as the Parasaurus goes, for my use, the Parasaurus has the ability to basically has 2 abilities that I'm concerned with. It has the ability to have a radar, which in my style of gameplay I don't really utilize so much, because I'm spawning in an area, I'm building a base, and I'm basically looking, because I'm just going to go around where my base is. I'm looking to dominate that area, so I don't necessarily need to be concerned about radar. Now, when I've played in the past, I've not really played with that assumption of, hey, I'm building a base. As soon as I spawn, I'm going to stick around that base, and if I want to go somewhere else, I'm going to build another base in the area in which I want to go, and then I'm going to stick around that base. Is when I've built a base and then wandered around the map, I've thought parasources were kind of useful, especially if you're going to go to for supply drops, because when I'm low level at first and I want to go collect supply drops, I can use that radar to see if there's any hostile dinosaurs around. And if there's no hostile dinosaurs around, I know I can just safely go to that supply drop, gather the contents, and then get back to my base as quick as possible, which, you know, is a good use for a parasaurus. I've also used parasaurus in caves in which they'll fit to where they're really good at basically showing you where hostile entities are inside of a cave. On the island, there's the dinosaurs that can crawl on ceilings and whatnot, the little lizard. Forget the name of it. I'm not going to try and guess, even though I imagine I get close. And the parasauruses are really good at detecting those. Now, when you take a parasaurus in a cave and you start using that radar, you're going to get blips of hostiles in all different places in the caves to where you're not going to necessarily believe that those are hostile creatures. You're going to think that it's picking up creatures, you know, subsurface of the cave, and because there's just so many of them. And in truth, that's not how it is. All the hostile creatures in the cave that the parasauruses lighten up are all hostiles, and they're going to be in the sides of the walls and in the ceilings and all over the place. And they're very valuable in that regards in a cave if you want to slowly go through it and know where creatures are inside the cave as you approach through it without getting ambushed, so to speak. But again, because I build a base in an area and then I stick around that base, which causes me to kind of dominate an area to where I know what creatures are around in that area, I don't necessarily have to rely heavily on that radar. Another use that I've never really seen anyone utilize, which I'm sure people have, is when you make a raft. It's a really nice thing to basically put a parasaurus on that raft and then set the parasaurus to turret mode to where it's constantly just scanning an area for enemies. And basically on a raft, you now all of a sudden have radar. Now the thing of it is I would try to utilize that when I would go into deep areas of the island on the ocean on a raft, but then there's I think they're Ledosauruses or something like that is what they're called, the kind of giant whale fish that immediately starts destroying your raft, which I kind of put a parasaurus on to kind of see where hostile creatures were underneath the water when I was using the raft, and I was trying to see where those were, so to speak, so I could maybe try to avoid them, which it kind of basically when you use a raft, you got to use a raft to basically go on rivers and to go along the shoreline. You can't really effectively use a raft out in open water. Otherwise, it's just destroyed. So again, the radar of the parasaurus is not really all that useful, but what I like to use the parasaurus for is basically as a mule to basically haul things like that. And this video is about the time's about up. And again, you know what we're covering just about 3 or 4 different things that I'd like to cover and play in Ark, as well as and then we'll get into just the gameplay. I've got some videos already prepared other than a voiceover to put over, but then once I get through some of those, I'd like to kind of make some videos where I'm kind of recording the voice as I'm playing the game so I can actually go into what I'm thinking. That's kind of because in a sense Ark will tell you how to play it, and Ark will tell you what you need to do next, just like in a sense any game will do that. And I'd like to go into that a little bit later. But thanks for watching, and work on getting the next one up in the future. Thanks again for watching.